Let me tell you something that completely changed my life. I'm Louisa Hart, and what I'm about to share with you, it's not another boring health lecture. This is the story of how I personally reversed arterial plaque, 20 to 25% in both of my carotid arteries, and it was completely gone in just 3 months. 3 months. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating battles in modern medicine. Powerful pharmaceutical drugs versus 2 extraordinary foods that science has been quietly studying for years. Let's start with the drugs, because honestly, they deserve credit where it's due. High-dose statins, we're talking the heavy hitters, the PCSK9 inhibitors, the drugs that cardiologists prescribe every single day. These medications can slash your LDL cholesterol by up to 60%. 60%! That sounds incredible, right? That sounds like a revolution. But here's where things get really interesting and maybe a little surprising. When researchers actually looked inside the carotid arteries, when they examined the coronary arteries of patients taking these powerful drugs, what did they find in terms of actual plaque reversal? Are you ready for this number? 0.015 millimeters. In the very best studies, the absolute cream of the crop results, they got to 0.04 millimeters of plaque reduction. I want you to really picture that for a second. We're talking about a fraction, a tiny, almost invisible fraction of a single millimeter. After months of medication, after all those side effects, after all that expense, what was actually happening inside those arteries? The plaque wasn't growing, but it wasn't really leaving either. It was just sitting there, frozen, like a car stuck in neutral on the highway of your cardiovascular system, not moving forward, not moving backward, just existing. And while that's technically better than progression, it's a far cry from the reversal that so many people are desperately searching for. So I started asking a different question. What if the answer wasn't in a pharmacy at all? Enter the first food that absolutely blew my mind and the minds of multiple research teams around the world: pomegranate. Now, I'm not talking about sitting down and eating a whole pomegranate, digging out all those little ruby seeds. I'm talking about juice, pomegranate juice, and not even a huge glass of it, just 50 milliliters per day. If you poured that into a cup right now, you'd almost wonder if it was even worth drinking. It's a tiny amount. But here's what happened when people drank that tiny amount every single day for 1 year. The thickness of the walls in the carotid arteries, which directly reflects the plaque that's building up inside, decreased. Not by a tiny fraction of a millimeter. We're talking 17% reduction. In some cases, up to 30%. 30% reversal of arterial wall thickening from 50 milliliters of juice per day. Now, I have to be completely honest with you, because I believe in giving you the full picture. Some studies have replicated these results beautifully, and others have struggled to reproduce them. And I'll explain exactly why that variability exists in just a moment, because it's actually a crucial piece of the puzzle that most people completely miss. But first, let's talk about the mechanism, because this is where pomegranate gets absolutely spectacular. It doesn't work the way you'd expect. It doesn't lower your LDL cholesterol number. It doesn't dramatically raise your HDL number. So what on earth is it doing? It's attacking the problem at a completely different angle. And honestly, it might be the smarter angle. Pomegranate reduces LDL oxidation by 90%. 90%. Here's why that matters so much. It's not just having LDL cholesterol in your blood that causes plaque. It's oxidized LDL, damaged, chemically altered LDL, that triggers the inflammatory cascade that builds plaque in the first place. When that oxidized LDL is essentially eliminated from the equation, one of the primary engines driving plaque formation just shuts down. But pomegranate doesn't stop there. It goes one step further in a way that genuinely excites me every time I think about it. While it can't increase the number of HDL particles in your blood, it supercharges the ones you already have. It makes your HDL cholesterol dramatically more powerful at doing its most important job, going into arterial walls, grabbing cholesterol and hauling it out. This process is called reverse cholesterol transport, and pomegranate essentially puts it into overdrive. So you get a double attack, less plaque being formed and more plaque being actively removed. That's not just prevention, that's reversal. And statins, for all their power, simply cannot do that. Now, let's talk about the second weapon in this arsenal. And this one is so fascinating, it has its own incredible origin story. It's called nattokinase. Say it with me, nattokinase. And it comes from a traditional Japanese fermented food called natto, which is made from soybeans that have been fermented with a specific beneficial bacteria. But here's the thing. You don't have to use soybeans. You can also produce nattokinase from fermented black beans, from fermented chickpeas. The fermentation process is the key. Now, a large retrospective study conducted in China, and we're talking about over 1,600 participants followed for a full year. So this is serious research with real statistical weight. Found that nattokinase supplementation reduced plaque size and arterial wall thickness by up to 36%. 36%! And the participants were taking 10,800 fibrinogen units of this supplement daily. That's a significant dose. If you just ate traditional natto at home, you'd be getting maybe 2,000 units. The research showed that at lower food-level doses, reversal wasn't really happening. But starting around 6,000 units and scaling up toward that 10,800 unit mark, something remarkable began occurring inside those arteries. And crucially, no significant side effects, no alarming problems, just results. How does nattokinase actually do this? It targets something called fibrin. Picture fibrin as the invisible scaffolding, the structural framework upon which plaque constructs itself inside your arterial walls. Fibrin is the network, the foundation, the skeleton of the plaque. Nattokinase is essentially a precision demolition tool that breaks down that scaffolding. When the framework collapses, the cholesterol and other materials that make up the plaque become far easier for your body to mobilize and remove. It's structural engineering at a microscopic, biological level, and it's genuinely breathtaking. So here's what Louisa Hart actually did. I took everything I learned from these studies, I understood the mechanisms, and I combined nattokinase, which also comes packaged with vitamin K2 when you get it from natto, with daily pomegranate juice. I understood that these two worked on completely different but complementary pathways, and I also addressed what I call the necessary conditions, the three underlying factors that have to be corrected for any of this to truly work. And I'll be dedicating a full video to those conditions very soon because they're absolutely critical and too important to rush through. The result? 20 to 25% plaque in both of my carotid arteries. Gone, completely gone. 3 months. Not reduced by a fraction of a millimeter, gone. And here's the insight that ties everything together, the big picture that I want you to walk away from this video truly understanding. This isn't really about your LDL number. The entire medical conversation around cholesterol has been so laser focused on lowering LDL that we've missed the forest for the trees. Yes, lowering LDL matters. It absolutely helps, and it addresses one piece of the puzzle. But plaque formation is a multi-step process. It requires oxidation. It requires inadequate reverse transport. It requires fibrin scaffolding. Statins address one lever. Pomegranate and nattokinase together address 3 or 4 different levers simultaneously, and they address the levers that drugs don't touch. This is what lifestyle modification actually means at its most powerful. It's not just eating salads and going for walks, though those matter too. It's understanding the biochemical mechanisms of disease and intervening at multiple points with tools that nature has provided. When you combine pharmaceutical support where appropriate with these dietary interventions, and you eliminate the underlying conditions driving plaque in the first place, you're not just managing disease, you're reversing it. You're literally rebuilding the health of your arteries from the inside out. Imagine committing to this approach for a full year. Imagine 5 years of supporting your cardiovascular system this completely and intelligently. You wouldn't just be in better shape than you are today. You'd be actively preventing future heart attacks. You'd be rewriting the trajectory of your health, and that matters enormously, because heart disease remains the #1 cause of death worldwide. It takes more lives than almost anything else on this planet. But here's what the research is quietly telling us. What Louisa Hart is here to say out loud. It doesn't have to be inevitable. The plaques that build up over decades of life can be reversed. The damage can be undone. And sometimes the most powerful tools available aren't sitting behind a pharmacy counter. They're sitting in a bottle of deep ruby juice and a supplement derived from humble fermented beans. This is your cardiovascular system. This is your life, and you have far more power over it than you've ever been told. Stay curious, stay informed, and I will see you in the next video.